I've noticed, I've used this phrase cognitive blindness before. Now, the way I use it is sort of something I made up. Maybe somebody else has used the term, but the way I'm using it is that there are some ideas that are so counter to what we imagine about the world that we actually can't see them. Like you could actually hand it to somebody and they would be just actually blind to it. They couldn't see something that you handed them if it was so contrary to their worldview. And I'm noticing that with the issue of nuclear energy and the Green New Deal. It is completely objectively, unambiguously true that nuclear has to be a gigantic part, and maybe the most important part, but at least a gigantic part of any kind of a climate change response. And the fun part is that nuclear energy should be just as important and just as pushed just as much, even if climate change isn't a problem. It turns out to be one of these rare situations where the solution is exactly the same, no matter what your assumptions are. I mean, how often does that happen, right? When do you have one solution that fits a variety of assumptions? That's pretty rare. And so I noticed that people on the left are having cognitive blindness to even the topic. And the way that you can see that is that somebody will say, Green New Deal, we need Green New Deal, we need to do something about the climate. Somebody else will say, yes, and nuclear is the answer because it's safe now. We figured out how to do it safely, and it's the only thing that can scale up and give us all the solutions. Now, what does the person who said Green New Deal say next? Nothing. They won't say the word nuclear. They won't address what the other person said, and they will react as though no conversation had just happened. You're going to see this a lot. Now, somebody just mentioned, got ahead of me. I've seen it twice now on The Five, TV show The Five on Fox News. Now, they have Juan Williams, who represents the left on their panel of other people who are libertarian or right-leaning. And we've seen Juan do it twice. He'll say, the administration has no plan at all for climate change. Greg and Jesse, at least, and I don't know, maybe Dana said it too, but it's pointed out loudly and repeatedly, nuclear, the administration is pro-nuclear. That is the plan. It's the only plan. It's the only thing that can work. Words to that effect. And what does Juan do? He looks at them, he listens, and then he starts talking as though it hadn't happened. As if there had been no words in the air. And it's really fun to watch because you're seeing a genuine cognitive dissonance kind of reaction where he can't incorporate the idea that the thing he thinks is going to destroy the world is already solved. Now, I say already solved, meaning that there's an obvious path forward. It has everything you need for a solution. We could choose not to do it. But you don't have to ask whether we have a solution, because we have a solution. We just have to decide to use it. But watch how often you'll see that in other interviews. I think watch for other panel discussions, let's say any CNN show. If you see a CNN show in which there's a panel of left-leaning people and they have maybe one person, Steve Cortez or somebody, one person representing the pro-Trump side of the world, watch when that person mentions nuclear energy and watch the other people not argue against it and not accept it, but act like it didn't happen. That's what you want to watch for. It's fascinating. Now, there's one thing that could break this cycle. His name is President Trump. If President Trump decided to completely kill this topic and own it and take it off the table, just vanquish the topic. I mean, own the topic in a way that nobody's ever owned a topic before. Like, just come in and just dominate it. All he'd have to do is one tweet. Nuclear is the answer. We're working on it. Here's a link to some of the things we're doing to support the nuclear industry. Yeah, that's it. This is the way to solve climate, or even if it's not a problem, it's the same solution. Some kind of a tweet from the president that's pro-nuclear and says even the Green New Deal people should love it. Because you can't ignore the president. If the president says nuclear energy is the way to deal with a climate problem, or even not a climate problem, he'd have to word it so it's compatible with things he said before. They can't ignore it at that point. They can ignore it from me, they can ignore it from Greg Gutfeld, they can ignore it from any pundit, but they can't ignore it if the president says it. Now, I don't know why the president hasn't said it yet, because it's based on what his administration is doing, what the Department of Energy is doing under Perry, it's unambiguously clear that they're pro-nuclear. But there must be some decision-making that's going on about not including that in their messaging. So from a communication perspective, apparently the White House has decided it's not a message they want to sell, even though with one tweet, and I mean this literally, the president could, with one tweet that was unambiguously pro-nuclear energy, if it showed some knowledge that the Generation 3 and 4 are safe, which would be the important part, because the public doesn't know that yet. They think nuclear energy is the old technology. They don't know that there's never been a mistake with Generation 3. Never. There's never been a meltdown. And Generation 4 will be essentially unmeltdownable. It won't even be an option with that design. So if he could show some knowledge that that's the case, put it in a tweet, put it in an announcement, it would completely upend the entire conversation. And from that point on, the left would be nothing left but healthcare, basically. They would have healthcare to talk about, and that's it. And I think the president could take a big bite out of that before the election day, too. So somebody says you need to change the word nuclear. Yeah, maybe. But, I'm never in favor of persuasion that is so on the nose. I don't like calling the a missile a Patriot missile. I don't like giving things cute names because everybody knows what it is. Everybody understands what you're talking about. So I find it bad persuasion to try to trick people with a word when they know they're being tricked. It just feels so ham-handed that I think maybe it works in the wrong way. It decreases your credibility. So I hear what you're saying. I just think in this case it's just a little too manipulative. If you can't sell this by describing what it actually is, because what it actually is frickin' amazing, right? The actual reality with the right facts should sell this thing like nothing's ever been sold. It's an easy sale. You should use any word you want, and it should be able to sell it just the same, because it is that clean a message and it is that clear and obvious thing to do.